Hey, it's Mosquito, also known as Chris. Welcome back to the shop. We're going to keep working on the InWin A1 mod a little bit. I'm thinking I'm going to probably do a little bit of a dry fit, sort of a, just get everything in there. Now that we've got the dual GPU mount figured out, we've got the motherboard obviously already in there. We can just get the radiator in there, and then we'll throw the power supply and see if we can't figure out what to do with the reservoir and the pump. Just figure out a way to do that, and then also probably make sure I can still fit a 120 millimeter fan on the side. Since I got rid of the one in the back, I think I want a little bit of exhaust on the sides, common to the power supply. So with that, I think we will just jump right into it. All right, let's see if we can't ruin a reservoir. So this is I don't remember what the size is, 30 seconds maybe? Roughly whatever I could find in Imperial that corresponds to the, I think it's 11.5 millimeter that I need in order to drill a hole to tap for G-quarter threads. This is the top of res pump combo that I have, and I'm going to drill a hole in that so I can put another port on the side of it for the return. Hopefully. I sure hope it doesn't just sort of decide to blow up into a bunch of different little pieces. Well, that certainly seems like it could have gone worse. We definitely have a hole drilled, and it's pretty much right where I wanted it, so that's good. And pretty clean. Should note that this is, you can see how pointed this drill bit is. This is actually intended for acrylic, so probably wouldn't have tried doing a hole quite that large with a standard twist drill bit if it wasn't intended for plastic, just because I'm pretty sure that would have ended disastrously for sure. All right, now gonna have to tap that hole. All right, so something that you don't see a whole lot of, I'm guessing, is power tapping on the drill press. So I have my G-quarter thread tap in my drill press, and what you do is you basically pull this right down to there, and then you turn your drill press on, and this will just drive that thing right in, and then you turn it off right away to make sure that you don't, accidentally thread all the way through or break something. Don't do that. I'm definitely full of crap. So here's the plug. Don't do that. Definitely unplug your drill press. I do have my G-quarter thread tap in the drill press, and the reason for that is because this will help me make sure that I actually get this perfectly in line with that hole that I drilled. So the drill press will hold it in place, and then I'll be able to spin this by hand to cut those threads perfectly perpendicular to what I was drilling. And then I just kind of spin the chuck by hand, a little bit of light pressure on the handle, and then I back up every so often, about a quarter a turn, or about every quarter turn I'll spin back the other direction a little bit, maybe a half a turn, and just sort of break those chips a little bit. And one option, which if I was going to be tapping smaller holes, I would probably use something, probably soapy water. In this case I didn't, just because it's a much larger tap, and I felt like it was doing all right without it, but just something to help lubricate it a little bit while you're cutting the threads. But this is pretty much all there is to it, and once you're done, you just have a pretty square hole, depending on how square your setup is. But yeah, actually, when I did all the tapping for the aluminum GPU, vertical GPU brackets, I did that the exact same way. I just drilled the holes in the drill press and then stuck the tap in there, I only started that one this way, and then I finished it with an actual tap wrench. And if you're not too familiar with the tap wrench, this is basically a tap wrench, or one variation of a tap wrench. Your smaller tap, I think I have one. Yep, right here. So this was the one that I used for the GPU mount, 632 for holding the graphics cards in place. And basically your tap just goes in here, you tighten this down, and then it's basically like just a mini drill, call it, or a chuck, whatever. And yeah, you can use that to, get leverage to cut the threads with. But yeah, I don't actually have a tap wrench big enough for this G-quarter thread, so luckily it fit in the drill press, so I could get that started that way. And, or actually I guess in this case I just did it that way. So yeah, that should be good enough for what I need. And over here at, I guess you'd call it the computer table, we have just a regular G-quarter fitting, and that hole that we just drilled there, that'll get the job done. Alright, so this was that pump top, the reservoir portion of it, that I just drilled that hole and tapped it for the G-quarter threads. And it's sort of a 2 or 3 part thing. So you got the pump, whether or not that counts, and then you have this pump top and sort of a mini res, and then that res top part that we actually just drilled out for the extra port. And right now I just have a, I think it's a Swiftech SLI fitting, but it's down here between the pump and the radiator. And I added that extra port because the other default port is right here, which isn't very helpful for what I'm trying to do. But anyway, this is one of the plans, or one of the ideas, and it gives me enough room to have the GPUs in here. It's lower than the power supply, which is also good. It should be enough liquid. I may end up having to put another port up here just to try and fill it a little bit easier. I'm not 100% sure how I'll do that part yet, but basically with this setup, I'd be planning on going out of here, the pump, straight into the radiator, out of the radiator, probably into the CPU, out of the CPU, into the GPUs, out of GPUs, back into here. And I know that this setup, at least with this pump, will work, because this is the pump that I was using for most of the testing when I was doing the CPU block and both GPUs. So I know that this will be enough to get through the radiator and all 3 blocks. What I'm not sure of, though, is whether I like it. I mean, I don't mind it, actually. I think it actually looks okay, and I'm happy with the arrangement of the setup and the space that it takes, because it doesn't really block off too much airflow from the radiator. But I do have a couple of chunks of these 2-inch thick acrylic, which is quite thick. But I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is a design that I could maybe make my own pump top reservoir combo that I could get into this system somehow. But the main challenge for me is, yes, I have a CNC, but although I'm sure a lot of people will disagree, CNC is not as easy as it looks. Yes, it's a lot easier to cut parts than trying to cut it freehand, but you don't have to design anywhere near as perfectly when you're just, gonna, oh, well, I'll just go and wing it. So I'm still struggling through trying to get some of these things designed up, trying to come up with a design that I can actually machine. That's a whole different animal versus just coming up with an idea. So I have plenty of ideas. I'm trying to design them up in Fusion 360 so that I can figure out a way to do it on the CNC with my limited experience on that. So yeah, that's that's the hope anyway, is to try and come up with something for that. So yeah, don't really know how that's going to go yet. And here I'm just kind of cutting off the 2 very ends. There's just to straighten out the one side of this. This is the factory, or the OEM power supply shroud. And I'm going to just cut off these 2 little tabs on the end, and then I will drill and tap some holes so that I can mount that in the chassis, because I wouldn't mind continuing to use that just to help hide some of the wires, since there's not too many other places to do that. And here we are with more or less everything nicely mocked up. I've got a slim 120 millimeter fan on the side for some exhaust, both graphics cards, a motherboard, power supply, and radiator with the res pump. All right, so that's the dry run, so to speak, or literally speaking. Well, I guess technically there's still some water in the graphics cards, but that's maybe how that's going to go. I'm still going to have to do a couple of things. Like, I'm not quite happy with this. I might, well, one, for sure, I'm going to either get smaller head screws or countersink that a little bit better or something, just because they stick out a little bit too far. And I'll probably drill out those holes a little bit more so that this sits a little bit more flush. And then we'll see if I find another spot to put a screw in there. But I think I'm probably going to keep that. The reservoir pump combo, I don't know. I might just put everything together with the water block on the CPU and get all the plumbing run and just make sure that I can get all that working and see how this does. And we might go from there and see whether or not I end up keeping it. But I'm going to continue to try to come up with some sort of a design. I'm still messing around with different ideas, trying to figure out what I might be able to do for a custom res pump sort of a thing, just because I why not, I guess. I've got time, so we'll just have to see what I can figure out. But yeah, thank you for sticking around. Thanks to those who watched. I definitely appreciate it. And until next time, I will catch you later. Why am I so bad at outros? Those are really hard.